Pretty quiet in Parliament there, only 50 people allowed inside, but some cheering from the MPs, the lawmakers who are watching this virtually. And quite an interesting State of the Nation address, not only looking forward. Remember, this is usually about the plan of action for the year ahead. The President said, we don't want to make promises. Let's look at what has been achieved thus far. And looking back, of course, there's been a recovery plan, an economic rescue plan, following the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's take you live to Parliament now. Bolelane Philip standing by. A reaction outside. Bolelane, what's happening?
All right, thank you so much, Francis, and welcome back to the precinct of Parliament. Of course, the President declaring that this is not just any other State of the Nation address, given the challenges that are facing the country. And as you've said in your intro, he's departed from the path of making promises, instead choosing to make a report back card, as well as outlining his government's priority areas. We're going to take political reactions here on the steps of Parliament and bringing in John Steenhuisen, the leader of the Democratic Alliance. His report card, are you impressed with it?
Well, I think there's good, bad and ugly. I think the good is the extension of the COVID relief grant to citizens. The economy has been completely decimated through lockdowns. For many citizens, this is a lifeline that's been keeping food on the table. So I think it's good that it's been extended. The bad, the President spoke about reforms again this evening. He's not tabled a single one in Parliament. He didn't give an indication about when his bills are going to come to the House. These labour reforms that he's talking about, when are they going to see the light of day? He can talk about reforms. He can keep them on a piece of paper in a drawer in the union buildings. Until he brings them to the floor of the Parliament here, he's not going to get them passed. So there was nothing new tonight about concrete reforms to rebuild our economy, to move away from the destruction. And then the ugly, a complete failure to deal with Eskom this evening in any comprehensive way. Hanging on to state control of the entity, not talking about the breakup that was promised many in two SONAs ago, and allowing a greater amount of public partnership. No talk about the other SOEs. Didn't mention South African Airways once. This is a huge problem. We've got a 300 billion rand hole in our balance sheet, and yet not a word about these state entities. And then job creation. Nothing new on job creation. We've got millions of people that lost their jobs and are without hope. I'm afraid the President was very right to use the Fynbos analogy, because what we actually need, as the Fynbos does every 20 years, is a blaze to get rid of this government and to bring in a new government that's going to be serious about growth, jobs, acceleration and inclusivity, and building a new South Africa.
Well, he's calling on the lawmakers as well as the country at large to use this occasion to actually, grow and work together in terms of defeating this pandemic. You, as a leader of the opposition party, what practical options or what practical recommendations would you have tabled in front of him?
We've already tabled them all. The COVID-19 action plan for the incapable state, our blue book that we presented to the presidency on a ministry-by-ministry approach, our 6-point vaccine action plan was tabled with the presidency, our creation of an ombudsman to ensure that you didn't have PPE procurement. But what we would say now, if I could give him one piece of advice that I hope he listened to, vaccines. We need vaccines, and we need lots of them, and we need them as quickly as possible to avoid a third or fourth wave. Approve a variety of vaccines and break the government monopoly on who can bring them in. Let hospital groups, medical aids, private companies bring in vaccines so that we can get as many as possible vaccinated, so that we can avoid having a third or fourth lockdown that's going to kill more jobs and kill the economy even further than it has been already.
Lastly and quickly, this report card, what would you give it out of 10?
I'd probably give it a 4 out of 10. I think there was some good, as I said, some bad, but some really ugly. The other thing as well, President talking again about corruption. Talking about corruption while Arthur Fraser remains the Director General of Correctional Services, and David Mashlobo remains in the President's cabinet. You can't get serious about corruption when you're cosseting the very people that are implicated at the very heart of your administration.
All right, John Steenhuisen, the leader of the Democratic Alliance, giving his views on what his thoughts are on this year's State of the Nation address. For now, we'll cross back to you, Francis, in studio.
Thank you very much. Bolelane Philip, live from Parliament. We continue our special coverage following the State of the Nation address in Parliament. Sabisa?
Francis, right now we get reaction from the EFF's Deputy Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Floyd Shivambu. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. You've heard what the President has to say. They have made gains where there are losses. He mentioned the automotive sector. He even mentioned how many more people are getting social grants. What is your view of what he's just reported back to the country?
Thanks, Tsepiso, for having us. And our observation, the preliminary observation, is that there is nothing fundamentally new that the President has said. There's nothing different that he has said which was not said before. And that amounts to insanity, because insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. The difference today was that he was trying to be a hype man of a dying, or actually a dead horse, in terms of where we are. What is the state of South Africa's economy and society currently? We've got more than 10 million people that do not have jobs. And 2 million of those lost their jobs during the lockdown period. And you would know that even prior to the lockdown period, the economy was growing in the negative. There was no expansion of the industrial sector. There was nothing that was beginning to bring hope that people will get out of poverty.
Okay, just
and poverty is deepening because poverty is
allow me to just talk about these figures that the President quoted, Mr. Shivambu. We'll talk about poverty. For instance, when he spoke about the Public and Social Employment Plan, he said 430,000 opportunities have already been created through stimulus. Another 180,000 opportunities or applications are now open. He also said that 300,000 education professionals have been placed at schools. So are you saying that
that is a drop in the ocean? And even those numbers that were being hyped about, they are objectionable numbers. But still, that is a drop in the ocean. So if you compare that to the number of people who went back to poverty because of joblessness, it's a minimum of 2 million as announced by Statistics South Africa. So the crisis is far much bigger than the numbers that he's mentioning. You started, for instance, with the automotive industry claim that is giving about Ford assembling cars in Pretoria. That is insignificant. The state is actually losing a lot of money to subsidize these assembling points. It's not manufacturing points as he claims. Less than 20% of the components that are manufacturing cars for Toyota, for Ford, for BMW, for Mercedes-Benz are coming from outside. And South Africa is just over-subsidizing these without a clear localization plan, without compliance being demanded from that. Let's deal with something that is very important. One issue that he deliberately omits, which is actually in the manifesto of the ruling party which he represents, is to utilize state procurement as a driver for localization and industrialization, because their manifesto says 80% of state procurement must come from locally made goods and products, but there is no commitment like that. Okay. I'll give an example now. The state has spent...
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, Mr. Shivambu. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. Let's get more political reaction now, Francis.
Let's take you back live to Parliament. Samkele Maseko standing by. Samkele maybe knew the 350 Rand, this grant that was a lifeline for many unemployed, has been extended. But otherwise, something of a report back on the plans already announced because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, indeed, Francis, particularly when you look at the 350 rands that was being given to South Africans. That speaks right to the core constituency of the party who are going to bring in now. The IFP, Inkatha Freedom Party, are going to bring in their spokesperson, Mkhuleko Hlengwa, to respond on specifically that 350 rands that was being rolled out to South Africans. Mr. Hlengwa, the President has delivered his speech. He spoke about his bullet train that we spoke about earlier on, smart city, and issues of the vaccine, and also the 350 rands, there's a cushion to those who are vulnerable and economically.
Well, of course, we welcome those kind of interventions. They are consistent with what we had said, that there has to be short-term interventions insofar as the COVID-19 impact is concerned. But the management and administration of these funds has been a dismal failure, and this speaks to the heart of the collapse, really, of the Department of Social Development, amongst others. But also on the UIF, you have to look at those issues seriously, because UIF has said it's got no money. But moving to what the President has said broadly tonight, it felt like we were in SONA 2020, SONA 2019. We have heard these things before. It sounded like a pitch for a president who was actually gunning for re-election, but whilst actually in government. The outsourcing of the management of the state to new agencies that he wants to speak about. There is no need for a water agency when you've got water boards and a Department of Water and Sanitation. So amongst other things, the president tonight was not very concise and very clear in so far he was taking the country. Yes, obviously on the issues of the vaccine has provided the much needed clarity in that regard, and I'm sure that over the next few days and weeks the Department of Health will be providing the clarity that is required. But for all intents and purposes, the issues of employment that the president spoke about, people still don't have jobs. I'm not sure where these jobs are coming from. People on the daily do not have jobs. So it seemed like a box-ticking SONA as opposed to actually a SONA which was anchored in the daily lived realities of the president or of the people. As a statement of intent, the president would have wanted to achieve, yeah, sure, it sounds very nice, but we have to bring it back to say that deliverables are quite absent. You're speaking about NYDA and young people that he was referring to. There's no board in the NYDA, and so it brings into question the legitimacy and credibility what the president was advancing tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hlengwa. We're really out of time because of the reactions. I'm going to link to my colleague Bulelani Phillips to speak to the Good Party representative.
Well, thanks, Samkele. We're taking more political reactions here on the steps of Parliament. I'm going to bring into the conversation now where the Member of Parliament from the Good Party, Mr. Shaun August. Of course, the President has made a number of pronouncements, but one of the issues that has been awaited on is about his announcements on the rollout of this vaccine plan for fighting COVID-19. Not much new that has been said about it, but going forward, do you think you have hope that we'll actually roll it out in the fastest possible time?
Yes, definitely. The President, in this COVID, we as a nation, he ensured that we as a nation needs to rise out of this pandemic. And as Good, we say our nation needs to emerge after this pandemic to ensure that we have grown. We would have liked a little bit more of the rollout of the vaccination, where we'll start. He's given some clarity with regards to the type of vaccinations for the type of COVIDs that we have, or infections that we have. So we are happy with that, but we would have liked to hear a little bit more of the rollout that he would ensure in this country.
Talking about job creation as well as reigniting the economy, going down memory lane about what government is doing, are those enough to make sure that the people who've lost jobs during the lockdown are actually absorbed back into the economy?
We are aware that 2.2 million people has lost jobs in the 2020 year. Knowing and understanding that the pandemic has hit us hard last year, we've been watching the master plans that the President has been referring to. One of those master plans are the Good Minister, 987 million rand in the top 100 projects that she's been implementing in her department. We've also watched the 60,000 housing development that's coming in Gauteng. We've also watched the water and sanitation projects in this country, as well as the private sector in terms of the motor industry. So the master plans that's been put in place October month, we can see that some of them or most of them has been implemented. We just need to fast track those that's not being implemented to ensure that we get those 2.2 million back into the job market, as well as our youth that has just finished their tertiary and matric education.
Thank you so much, Shaun August from the Good Party, sharing his views on the State of the Nation address. For more reaction, Samkelo Maseko is standing by.
Thank you very much, Bulelani. I'm going to bring in the Freedom Front Plus, particularly to speak on the issues of the farming industry, which has shown growth in one of the quarters that President Ramaphosa has spoken about, the community of farming in South Africa. They've particularly shown growth. South Africa is now the second biggest exporter of citrus internationally. As the Freedom Front Plus, what did you take out of the President's speech tonight?
Well, firstly, I want to start by saying that the President is clearly living in a dream world. He is still talking about dream cities and smart cities, but the people on the ground level are experiencing unemployment and they don't have jobs. The fact of the matter is, the President also sticks to his expropriation without compensation, and it doesn't matter what plans he put on the table when it comes to the rebuilding of the economy and even land reform. and the farming community, as long as he continues with expropriation without compensation, he will not get the results he wants to.
When you look at the growth that the farming community has shown, particularly when you look at the 1 million chickens that are being produced every week by President Ramaphosa, you look at how the farming sector has basically shown growth even during this lockdown. Has government's policies that they have in place contributed to this growth, or it's simply just farmers doing the work all by themselves?
Well, we must thank the agricultural sector for producing the food so that the people can still have food on the table. And yes, we must remember that they were part of the essential sector that had to produce that. But the fact of the matter is, the natural constraints for farming in South Africa is not very conducive for farming. But besides that, they are doing excellent, as you said. They're creating jobs. You've referred to the chicken industry. Yes, those are opportunities. But again, I want to say, it can even improve if the government stops with its whole notion of expropriation without compensation.
When you look at the issues particularly surrounding the rains that have come in, how has this contributed and enhanced farmers, particularly with their production?
Well, if you say enhancing their production, I mean, that is the initiative from the farmers themselves. And we must remember, if we want to ensure upcoming farmers to be successful, they must get the support from existing farmers, and that can be mentors for them. It's no use to just give money and certain grants for farming, but you don't have the knowledge and the know-how to make a success of that.
Thank you very much for your reaction. I'm going to go back to my colleague Bulelani Phillips for further reaction to the State of the Nation address by President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Thank you again, Samkele. We're taking more reaction, and now I'm going to bring into the conversation the leader of the ACDP, Reverend Kenneth Meshwe. Of course, the biggest issue that we've been handling today, the government's response to fighting COVID-19, the ACDP's response to that.
Well, as always, the president has very good ideas, but implementation is always the problem. How? The question of how he's going to do it is a problem. Actually, we also expected him to apologize for bringing in 1 million vaccines that cannot be used now because they did not check when the expiry date would be or whether they would be relevant for the variant that we have in South Africa. And to hear that they only have 22% efficacy is a real disappointment. Now, we are not sure whether that money is going to be thrown down the drain or whether they are going to recover that money. We expected him at least to say something like that about that. Now,
who must be held accountable for those mistakes?
Well, the buck stopped at the president's door. His team, obviously, those who did the purchasing, those who did the negotiating, all of them, including the president, must take the responsibility for what has happened, and the president should have at least apologized that they made a mistake. People understand. If he did apologize, people would have accepted it. But the fact that he just kept quiet about it is a disappointment to us. And the issue of corruption, every year he says they will deal with corruption. Now we know that Brian Molefe, among others, pointed a finger at the president that he's also corrupt. Now he hasn't said anything about it, and we want to know whether the president definitely is part of corruption or not. He didn't say anything. And a crime, he mentioned crime again. What is he going to do this year that they didn't do last year? It's going to be a repetition of every year, telling us they're concerned about crime, but it doesn't tell us anything different they're going to do. Concerned about corruption, nothing that they're going to do. That's different from the previously. So we are disappointed that he has stated the facts and the problems that we know about, but how he's going to deal with them, he didn't tell us.
All right. Thank you so much, Reverend Kenneth Meshwe, the leader of the ACDP, quite concerned about certain issues. And we're going to take more reaction now with Samkele Maseko.
Yes, Bulelani, indeed. Now we're getting the Minister of Health, Dr. Zwelini Mkhize, particularly to speak on the vaccine. Minister Mkhize, the President said we're expecting the first batch of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine into the country next week. Are you positive that that particular vaccine will respond to the second variant in South Africa?
Yes, certainly there's been The trials have demonstrated that they've got a 57% efficacy, and therefore with the results that we have received, we are quite confident that it's a good vaccine to use. And in fact, when we start, the other advantage with it is that's a once-off dose, which will make it easy for us to reach more people within a shorter space of time. The President has indicated we expect the first batch to come in next week, and the vaccination program has to start. I think the emphasis on vaccination and economic recovery is very, very important, because the main issue now is how do we rebuild our lives? And the President went into details on that aspect, and how do we build our livelihoods so that our economy, our social life is rebuilt, dealing with the issues of unemployment, reactivation of the various sectors, rebuilding our energy sector, and also dealing with crime and corruption and all of that. That whole package for us is about how we as South Africans must rise and look back at a very difficult year and say, as South Africans, we've been able to survive together. And that for me was why the message was very important tonight.
Mr. Mkhize, the President was very thin on the details of the rollout of the vaccine throughout all 9 provinces of the country. As the Minister of Health in charge of this rollout of the vaccine with the Deputy President and the Interministerial Committee, can you please take us into confidence of the granular details of the rollout of this vaccine once it arrives?
Well, I think what's important is to say that the details will be coming along during the course of the week. But what the President has pointed is a very clear line that basically says, whatever happens, we need to start our vaccination program, and we have to start that program as soon as possible. And then in addition, we need to then make sure that all South Africans embrace this issue of vaccination. It's indicated 80,000 doses will be coming in, and then they will be spread over the next several weeks, and therefore over 500,000 of them should be received. We believe therefore that there's a good basis to start the vaccination campaign. I'm sure there'll be a lot more that will be coming, that will announce with time.
As a former Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Minister Mkhize, I'm sure you are familiar with Ngwavuma. In Ngwavuma, there is no proper roading infrastructure in that particular region of the country. How do you then ensure that this rollout of the vaccine gets to the deplorable of areas in the country where there's no proper infrastructure?
The structure, the network that is being created is built onto the health system. It is built onto available facilities. And therefore that plan will make sure that you can go into some areas where you can put up vaccination centers where there's smaller radiuses and yet a large population. Then in the other rural areas we'll have a center where we'll be able to reach out to that level. So it's very, very important for us to understand that every South African that needs to get the vaccine should be reached, and that is our commitment to the President.
Will you invite me when you get vaccinated, Minister, to get a few visuals of you getting vaccinated to encourage South Africans?
Sure the media is there when the vaccination starts so that everybody can see that indeed it has started. Many media have been doubting that it's going to happen. Some South Africans, you see on Twitter, people don't even believe it's going to happen. I just want to say, when it starts to happen, everyone hopefully will be able to understand that we have started a long road to ensure that South Africans are kept safe and that the South Africans are able to begin the fight to reverse the scourge of COVID-19.
Thank you very much, Minister Mkhize. That was the Minister of Health, Dr. Zwelini Mkhize. I'm going to throw over to my colleague Bulelani for further reaction from Jama-ah.
All right, thanks once again, Samgel. Of course, a lot of talking points from this SONA of this year, and I'm going to bring into this conversation the leader of the Jama-ah party, Mr. Muhammad Hendricks. Thank you so much for your time. A lot of things have been happening this week around load shedding. The President made some announcements around how they want to turn around Eskom. Do those plans address the concerns that you've been making all along?
No, I don't think those plans will ever address the concerns. You know, we're going to rely on wind power, and we are going to rely on new methods which must be tested. And I don't think South Africa is ready for that. The President has shocked the nation by stating that Eskom there will be further deterioration, and we'll be short of so many megawatts, and the President has not given us any assurance and peace of mind that the promises he made in the last order with regard to Eskom will improve. In fact, it is going from bad to worse. So the country's energy crisis will not be solved by the plans that the President has shared with the nation. So very disappointed with regard to the President's action plans for ESCOM.
And announcements on social relief schemes being extended?
We're very happy that the 350 Rand will continue for another 3 months. This will put a warm plate of food on many people's tables. I remember in the first State of the Nation address, the President promised the country that everyone will have a warm plate of food. Also, the tiers benefit for the unemployment fund will also help a lot of workers, and I'm sure the trade unions will welcome this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muhammad Hendricks, the leader of the Jama-ah party, giving us his views on this SONA 2021 of this evening. And for now, we're going to try to get some more political reactions on the floor. We're going to bring in PAC MP, Mr. Mzwanele Nyonso. Mr. Nyonso, basically the issue around the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, the President pretty much repeating what the Health Minister has been telling us all along.
But he did not tell us when and how is he going to fight the scourge of COVID-19. Remember, even the vaccine that came here, we were told that it cannot fight what is there now. So it was not clear how is he going to fight the COVID-19. And the issue of vaccines is very controversial. We need to get answers. Where does it come from and how is it going to be effective if it can come to all the way from India? And when it comes to South Africa, it's not working.
Do you not trust it?
I don't. There's no way we can trust vaccines that are developed outside. I heard the President talking about local business, supporting locally. But I never heard him talking about supporting local herbs in the fight against this COVID-19. So I don't trust it.
Lastly, the announcement around the agency to extend or accelerate land reform, you must be happy.
That one remains a pipe dream. It has been said by everyone before him. It is going to be said by others. They don't have political will to address the land question. And as long as the land question is not addressed, the economy of this country will remain in this manner. And because few people, only 20% or 10% own the land, and 80% do not own the land. So as long as we don't change the economic structure, a true liberation will remain a pipe dream.
All right, thank you so much, PAC MP, Mr. Mzwanele Nyonso, giving us his party's views on the thinking of the 2021 State of the Nation address. For now, we cross back to you guys in studio.
Right, thank you very much, Bulelani. So, Francis, just reflecting back on some of what the President had said, what I found interesting was the fact that I think he said something in the region of 5 million people are now able to feed their communities and their families. But of course, he did speak about the fact that 18 more million people, that is a third of our population, are receiving social grants or some sort of relief. Then that goes back to the question of how much sustainable inequality efforts are there really? Because are we lifting people out of poverty if we're saying, just as the EFF was saying, just a drop in the ocean?
So this is such an interesting question, because that 350 Rand grant that was introduced as a lifeline to people who had basically nothing else, experts were saying once you introduce that, you cannot take it away because that's very hard for people to deal with. And we've seen government extend and extend and extend. And that was one of the really new announcements, another 3-month extension. But yes, so what comes after that? And we'll talk about all these
people. Sorry, that's what he was saying, yes.
So, I mean, it's a huge amount. And we'll talk about all the economics, the sustainability, like you say. What he's talking about is an enabling environment for business to create jobs. Are we doing that quick enough? We'll have lots of that in Economics Unbound with your host, Tandeka Ngobule. I'll be joining her and we'll crunch the numbers shortly.
Well, from me, that's good night. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.